Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jai Mr. Bhagavad Paramahamsa, Dravida Prabhu, Ashtotter to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Dravida Acharya, Ashtotter to the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Can you get a book? Or you're not going to stay? You can... Oh, okay. He's monitoring. Okay. All righty. On this 11th day of March 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I think it's the 12th. Isn't it the 12th? Is it the 12th? It is the 11th. Okay, I'm sorry I had it right. Okay. And we are in chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, page 170, text number 34. Indriyasyendriyasyarte ragadvesha vyavastitao tayo navashamagachet tao yasya padipantinao Indriyasyendriyasyarte ragadvesha vyavastitao tayo na vashamagachet tao yasya padipantinao Indriyasyendriyasyarte ragadvesha vyavastitao tayo na vashamagachet tao yasya padipantinao You got it, Janardan? Okay, Damodar, go ahead. Page 170. Indriyasyendriyasyarte ragadveshyam vabhastitao tayo navashamagacchit tau yasya padipantinao indriyasyendriyasyarte ragadveshyam vabhastitao tayo navashamagacchit tau yasya padipantinao indriyasya of the senses, indriyasya arte in the sense objects, raga attachment, dvesha also detachment, vyabhastitao put under regulations, tayo of them, na never, vasham control, agachet one should come, tau those he certainly, asya his, padipantinao stumbling blocks. Translation: there are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion, because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Purport: those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. But one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. According to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relationships with any women other than one's wife. All other women are to be considered as one's mother. But in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, they will be stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations. And yet, we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations, unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current for a very long time, owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment to Krishna consciousness, or acting always in the loving service of Krishna, detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense enjoyment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Well, it turns out we read this. I remembered when we read the purport and we came upon the royal roads, because I remember reading that last Wednesday. So I'll just speak a few words and then we'll go on. So the whole idea here is that in material life, in order to get onto the platform of progressive life, one has to have regulations. There has to be a higher authority. Otherwise, it's just the jungle. We're living in the jungle and animal life, and you degrade yourself more and more. So that's why he says there's regulations. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses of sense objects. So we have the whole Mano Samhita and the Vedic scriptures in general, which are meant to give us positive instruction for advancement and also to curb our lowest animal propensities. And Prabhupada mentioned sex desire. So that's something that's built into material life. That's basically why we're here. but it's precisely that needs to be regulated and directed to the process of within marriage and having Krishna conscious children. And therefore Krishna says in the 7th chapter, Dharma varuddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. I am that sex life or lust that is not against religious principles and therefore is following religious principles and means that within marriage for the sake of having Krishna conscious children. So that puts quite a restriction on it, as you can see. And also that even there's a certain time limit. It's not supposed to be for the whole life. There's a period when one gets past 50 or so, when you're meant to direct more and more of your energies into transcendental pursuits. So therefore, the whole purpose of this chapter, as we've mentioned before, is to teach us how to act in such a way that we're not simply incurring more and more karma, either good or bad, but rather weaning ourselves away from the sense gratification, and therefore the principle of sacrifice is there. The key verse is in the ninth verse here in this chapter. Yagyartat kamano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Is that work has to be performed as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, any other kind of work binds one to this material world. Therefore, do your duties, but do them in a mood of sacrifice, sacrificing the fruits as far as possible for transcendental reasons. And so you get the warning here. It's a basic that don't come under the control of the regulated sense gratification, because that can also lead to unregulated sense gratification. So the main lesson here is move toward the side of vairagya, attachment and aversion, the two sides of the same coin. The ideal is to be tolerant and transcendental to whether allurements of the material energy and the slings and arrows of the material energy, because that's going to come also. Both sides are going to be there. But to cultivate through all of it, the difficulties as well as the things that please one, essentially, one's attachment to Krishna. And that ultimately overwhelms everything. And that's ultimately the goal. So there you have it. Any questions on this verse? We go on to 35. Okay. Shreyan swadharmo viguna padadharmat swanushtitat swadharme dhananang shreyak padadharmo bhayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Purport. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness, rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties, even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. Time out. Hare Krishna. Okay, one should not imitate others. Okay. For example, a Brahmin who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmin who follows the principles of non-violence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmin, or a Brahmin may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmin. whereas Parashuram was a Brahmin, but later on acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so. But as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. So, the whole idea is it's like the application of a medical treatment. If you establish the ideal that I want to get healthy, then you'll accept all kinds of things that you wouldn't ordinarily accept. And you have to follow the prescriptions of the doctor, the do's and the don'ts and the medicines and the treatments and whatever it may be. Even though that may not be your natural desire. It probably isn't. You want to eat certain things, you have to stop eating them, you have to regulate your activities. You can't do something that you used to do while you're in convalescence or whatever. So the same thing holds. If we want to get cured of the material disease, then we have to accept the Vedic authority in the matters of our material as well as our spiritual life. Now, for those who are highly conditioned, there are certain prescribed duties according to your psychophysical nature, under the modes of nature. That's most conducive. And of course, who could help noticing that this is precisely what's going on with Arjuna? Arjuna, by his sentiment, not by some transcendental motive, wants to give up his prescribed duty. He's a Kshatriya, he wants to act like a Brahmin and go off and be a sage and a meditator and a beggar. But it's not natural for him. And so, and his motive for doing it is wrong, because Krishna wants him to fight. And so he's showing that even though you may call in various arguments that seem completely reasonable, and if you recall in the first chapter, he had arguments from the Vedas about how I will be responsible for the degradation of society because I'll kill all his men, their wives will be unprotected and they'll be Varnasankara, and it'll all be on me. So, and plus, I can't even enjoy the kingdom because it's going to be soaked with the blood of my friends and relatives and guru. So what's the point? So he has it all in his mind how he should give up his prescribed duty. But that's the fallacy. It's prescribed by the greatest authority, Krishna himself. So he should do it and not, and completely transcend the emotions he has, material emotions of friendship and respect for his guru and everything. That's secondary. That has to be put aside. So this verse is directly related to Arjuna. Better to meet destruction in your prescribed duty. If you follow the duty that is prescribed for you, which is also the duty that I want you to follow on transcendental grounds, then there can't be any failure. Your attempt to perfect that activity is itself success. Whereas if you leave your prescribed duty and go off begging somewhere, then there can't be any conceivable success because you've already failed by violating the main duty of following my orders. Krishna's Vedas personified. You see the problem. So that's why you have this verse, to stick to your duty. And in a society like we have in Krishna consciousness, you can see that the very idea of following the authorized instruction from above is more important than our own perception of what would be good and so forth. Because the idea of maintaining the validity of the authority is all important. Because without that, without the flow of authority coming down and accepting it, then everything falls apart. And even though we may have been right that, I'm an artist, I should be painting somewhere. Or we used to have a lot of musicians join. And they would bring their guitar or something they wanted to do, and preach for Krishna that way. Why can't I play my guitar in a temple, No. You have to go cook. You have to go out in Sankirtan. We need you to clean the temple. And people will get frustrated. No, it's not according to my psychophysical nature. But the whole idea of doing what's authorized and what will maintain the authority structure, which is the most fragile thing, right? For people to accept the authority of Krishna and his representatives in their own life even when it's not exactly what you want to do materially. That's the real austerity. That's paramount. And so that's what this whole idea is that if one nicely does his duties within society and then gradually moves toward transcendence, that's the standard way of doing it. Now, in exceptional cases where you have someone ready to just give up, then you have the other side, which we find it's in the Gita here, which we read, that you remember there's all this about duty, and then but for someone who's completely self-realized, who is completely satisfied in the self, there's no duty. Here, 16 and 17. If you remember, it says there's a certain cycle of sacrifice. The devas provide the rain, but you have to recognize their authority and worship the devas, right, and perform yajna. And then it's a cycle or a chakra. Evam bhavatitam chakram nanabhatayatihiya. So one who follows this, regulated as prescribed in the Vedas are directly manifest from the Lord. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. And by that sacrifice, the rains will come at the right time in the right quantity, the food will grow, you'll eat, you see. So the whole thing is 14 and 15 is all, if you want to eat, anad bhavanti bhutani, you need rain. But the rain is coming from the gods. And so you have to perform sacrifice, and the sacrifice is born of your prescribed duty. And the Vedas are giving you what the prescribed duty is, and the Vedas come from God. Therefore, all-pervading transcendence circulate in acts of sacrifice. One who does not follow this cycle in human life of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life of sin. You remember that? Agayur, Indriya Ramo. Aga Ayu. Ayu is your lifetime, your life of sin. And Indriya Ramo. Indriya Rama is sense gratification. Exactly. Indriya, gratification, sense gratification. Mogam, he lives a useless life. On the other hand, for one who takes pleasure in the self, Supreme Self, Krishna, whose human life is one of self-realization, who's satisfied in the self, for him there's no duty. He has no material duty. His duties are all transcendental, you see? So he doesn't have to worship the gods, he doesn't have to do all this. Because his every breath is a sacrifice. He's simply living for Krishna. There's no question that he's working for Krishna and sacrificing for Krishna. It's a given, you see? So you have these two sides, and therefore you have the injunction of Narada Muni when he's speaking to Vyasadeva in chapter 5 of the first canto, and he's saying that Tyaktva swadharmam. You know what Tyaktva means? Give up. Swadharma, your own swadharma here, which is what the subject matter is. If one gives up all of dharma and Chadanam Bhajang Hare, worships the lotus feet of Hari, but in the course of his bhajan, it becomes it's not completed in one lifetime. Tapatet tato, he falls down. Patet tato yadi. Where is there anything inauspicious? Because we know from the 6th chapter, we know from the 2nd chapter, that even what a little advancement or any advancement, then that's permanent. That's your permanent asset. So you make a little advancement, and then you fall away, and then you die, and then you pick it up in the next life. So there's no loss or diminution, you see. But on the other hand, one who very nicely follows his swadharma according to psychophysical condition, but there's no bhajan, there's no worship of Krishna, where is there any gain? It's completely material. So that's the other side of the argument. Just following your prescribed duties with no Krishna consciousness doesn't help you at all either. That has to be woven into your activities. So that's the idea here. Shreyan swadharma viganad. You're better to be destroyed in the course of performing your prescribed duties, as opposed to acting completely whimsically outside of the Vedic paradigm. But if you're going to surrender completely to Krishna and give up your prescribed duty and just do whatever is there transcendental, meaning that you'll just perform, get up in the morning instead of studying for your medical degree, you'll rather study Bhagavad Gita and wash the pots. That's much better, because it's all for Krishna, and you're actually within the realm of Krishna consciousness. So there's different things going on here. Okay, any questions? We're going to launch into the final few verses here, which is all about Kama, how it's the eternal enemy. For me, this is the most important section of this chapter. Okay. Let's see. Yes. Text 36. Arjuna Vacha Atakena Prayukto Yam Papam Charati Purushaha Anichannapi Bharshneya Balad Iminiyojitaha. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Purport. A living entity, as part and parcel of the Supreme, is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contaminations. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine, means very appropriate, pertinent, as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains in the next verse. So this is the kind of the theme of every addict in the world. You know, oh, I can't believe it. You know, you wake up after a bender. You know, you drank yourself under the table. Says, oh no, that again? What made me do it? You know, I knew it was bad for me. And the same thing with drugs and the sex addicts and the gambling addicts and every addict. But actually, when you analyze it, everybody's an addict in this material world. It may not be called addiction, but the basic addiction is the addiction to sense gratification in general. There's always some variety of sense pleasure that someone gets into, and again and again and again, as far as you can do. So, therefore, this is a kind of a universal question. How is the intelligence, the rare human intelligence, overwhelmed, you know, in many cases, and one acts in such a way against his own best interests? This is the what's happening in the material world. So let's see what the answer is. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Guna Samudnbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidjenam Mihavaidinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Purport. When a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust, as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the mode of passion, instead of being degraded into the mode of ignorance, is elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many for his ever-increasing spiritual bliss, and the living entities are parts and parcels of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of their independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. The material creation is created by the Lord to give facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill these lustful propensities. And when completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. This inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, wherein it is said, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, one should inquire into the Supreme. And the Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmadyasya Yaton Vayadi Tadatascha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If, therefore, lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Ram, exhibited his wrath by burning the golden city of Ravan. But by doing so, he became the greatest devotee of the Lord. Here also, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord induces Arjuna to engage his wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends instead of our enemies. So here you have the beginning of the lust section at the end of this chapter 3, very illuminating. So here, Krishna is saying that the real enemy in this world, Vidyanam, Vaidinam means enemy. So this material desire is our enemy, but it's not alien to us, because they say here that the original prema, or pure love for Krishna, is this same lust that in its pure form. This powerful desire to serve our senses was once the powerful desire to serve Krishna. But because we turned away from Krishna and broke that relationship, we didn't break the relationship, we forgot it. It's now forgotten, and we become absorbed in the material energy. So that same Ladini Shakti, which is pure love for Krishna personified, has now become lust and the desire to satisfy our own senses. Whereas Ladini Shakti produces great pleasure for Krishna and the living entities, this lust produces suffering. So that's what's going on here. And it's all due to the modes of nature. When that love, that prema, comes in contact with the mode of passion and ignorance, then it turns into lust. Mahashano, all devouring, mahapapman. So it begins with the kama, and then when that's frustrated, it turns to anger. And when the kama is kind of metastasized in one's consciousness, it becomes greed. Greed is also a result of kama. It all begins with kama, with strong material desire headed by sex desire. So what to do about that? Now, the whole point of Krishna consciousness is to sublimate the kama, is to take that strong desire and by the prescribed duties and ways of acting and living, as Prabhupada says here, to purify it and turn it more and more into a strong desire to serve Krishna. Looks like the gopis. The gopis are exalted as the most famous and greatest devotees of Krishna. Lord Chaitanya said so. Why is that? Because they're absolutely obsessed with serving Krishna, with pleasing him. And this is explained in the 4th chapter. What looks like lusty activities is actually a very powerful desire on their part to please Krishna in any way possible. When he calls them with the flute, they run out because they want to please him with their service. When they decorate their bodies and they look so beautiful, they're thinking just so that Krishna will be pleased in seeing them. There's no tinge of personal desire there. And this is nicely explained at the conclusion of the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita. The last chapter is called the Shikshastika. I don't know if you've ever read that chapter. But there's also interwoven with the Shikshastika verses Lord Chaitanya's own explanation of them. And the last verse has a very long explanation, apparently written by Lord Chaitanya. And the verse is like the pinnacle of this selfless desire. It's ashlishya pararatang panashtamam darshanan mahatang karotu vayata tata vavadadhatu lampato mat prananata suzeva napara. Let Madhava embrace this maid who's fallen at his feet, or let him trample me, or my most ardent hopes defeat, by never giving me a chance to see him anywhere, thus shattering my heart and plunging me into despair. You see, he is a restless libertine, and not a saint, so let him act in any way he likes without restraint. Yet though his cruel and crooked ways may cause me constant woe, Krishna is the only Lord my heart shall ever know. Now this is not a material relationship.
It's described elsewhere in the CC that prema can be characterized as when there's this very strong bond of love between two individuals, and then there's so many reasons to break that bond. The person leaves, gets another lover, marries someone else, has a million other children by so many wives, which is what Krishna did, 161,080 sons. In other words, he left them. He went far away, didn't return when he promised to right away. So normally, that would be a reason to turn on the person. I mean, it's happened 1 billion times in this material world. You have some relationship, a man and a woman, and then there's some other person comes in, the third person, there's divorce, and there's murder, right? What was once love turns into the strongest hatred, right? That's material. That's material. That's the result. Kama esha, krodha esha. The same kama turns to anger when it's frustrated. So that's self-centered. That's egotistical. That's exactly opposite the Krishna consciousness. But here, Srimati Radharani, or Lord Chaitanya in the mood of Srimati Radharani, is saying, let him embrace me, or let him crush me, let him ignore me, let him go away. He can do whatever he wants, but I'll never stop loving him. That's prema, you see. So how to get from lust back to love? It's not easy. In the next purport or so, Prabhupada says, once it turns into lust, it's very difficult to make that lust back into prema. But it's possible, even for a late beginner, he says. So Krishna, he expands himself. There's one verse in the Upanishads, Eko Bahusyam, the one Lord is manifest many. Why? Why did he expand into all these living entities, namely us? So that he can enjoy the relationships of love that we read about in the Krishna book and it's going on in Goloka Vrindavan. But there's a risk there because it depends on love. He doesn't just want robots, He wants to forget. Krishna wants to forget by Yoga Maya that he's God and he's the all-powerful. He doesn't want to be in that mood. That's not the supreme enjoyment, to be the God and dominator and just have servants, He wants to enjoy genuine friendship from those who love him for real, So he has to forget that he's all-powerful, and there's a certain risk. And the risk is he has to give some independence. Love can only be freely given. You can't force it. As soon as you're forcing it, it's slavery. It's not love. So Krishna doesn't want that. So he takes some risk in expanding into those with some minute independence, namely ourselves, and those who never misuse that independence, they're happily enjoying with Krishna in the spiritual world. And those of us who do, we come into this world. And this world is created so that we can enact this charade of being little gods and get kicked and burned and die repeatedly, and then hopefully come in contact with someone bearing the real transcendental knowledge and realize that we can't be happy in this way and start returning back to Godhead. That's the whole purpose of it. But the vast majority of living entities in this world are, certainly in this Kali Yuga, are not going to do that. There's so much enmeshed in the modes of passion and ignorance. So this movement is attempting to interest people in enlighten people in what the main problems in their life are: birth, death, old age, and disease, and that the way to solve the problems once and for all is to return home back to Godhead by the process of bhakti yoga. So this is very much where we live in fighting all these material desires. And what we'll read here is that as soon as we allow ourselves to come under the sway of kama, then we forget Krishna. Avritam Ganametena. This is one of the effects of kama, is that it makes you forget. It covers your actual knowledge. And then in that state of ignorance, you're helpless to the positive and negative influences of material energy, until we again connect back with Krishna through the process of bhakti, and then we get help. So, any questions on these points? Yes, Prabhu. You got a mic? Yeah. Yeah, it works. And then Mark, you have a question too. Okay, but he has first, then you can go.
Prabhu, can you explain how envy is connected to lust.
How, what is connected?
Envy.
Envy. Okay. How is envy connected to lust? Well, envy has two meanings in Prabhupada's vocabulary. One is the standard meaning of jealousy. Someone else has something you have, and you feel cheated, and you're envious. The other meaning is simply bearing malice. To be envious of someone means to just bear malice. And therefore Prabhupada says one should not be envious even of an ant. Well, obviously that's not jealousy. It means that be kind to the ant. Don't simply step on the ant or kick him out of the way, you know. Recognize there's a living entity there who's working out his life through the karmic, you know. So that's the Krishna conscious vision of seeing God in everyone, seeing the soul in everybody, and being kind to everyone. So you can see that karma is based on, you know, my own, is based on false ego. It's based on I want to enjoy and dominate. In other words, it leans toward the demonic qualities. You know, if that becomes very prominent in your life. So inevitably, that placing oneself first and prioritizing one's own sense pleasures means that you're going to compare yourself and your pleasures to others, and there'll always be those who have more and who you think you should have what they have, and so it naturally leads to envy. As soon as one is disconnected from Krishna, even forgetting, even though intrinsically you can't break the relationship, but you can certainly forget it. It can become eclipsed in your own mind. Then your attention is going out according to the modes of nature, and you're looking, this is pleasing to me, this relationship is displeasing, why shouldn't I have this, you know? And it naturally feeds the false ego, aham mameti. And so and what is that aham, what is that I? Well, that's this body with the senses, which is saturated with material desire. So they're very closely aligned. As we'll learn, this kama is just like fire. It can never be satisfied. If you just feed it with something, it just inflames you more and more, and you have more and more ideas of enjoyment. So inevitably, because the way the material world is set up, you can't get everything you want, and often what stands in your way are other people. Or other, they have more money than you, or they get the girl you don't, whatever it is. And so naturally, you become frustrated, and that leads to anger, and envy is like very close to anger. So that's why karma leads to envy. Now, if you are purifying your karma, and you're practicing Krishna consciousness, and what you're experiencing, even in the earlier stages, is more of like a natural satisfaction, just being Krishna conscious, just chanting Hare Krishna. If you're fully satisfied in chanting Hare Krishna, even though you may not be chanting on the Prema Bhakti platform, but you're feeling satisfied, then automatically, why should you envy anyone? I'm chanting, you're chanting, we're both enjoying a relationship with Krishna. You see? In other words, it completely cuts off, the Krishna consciousness cuts off the root of envy, which is self-centered, egotistical enjoyment at the expense of others. So therefore, they're diametrically opposed. Prema and kama are kind of diametrically opposed. They're compared to iron and gold. They're both metals, but that's about it. Gold is treasured, and iron is very base. So he defines the difference between lust and love. Right? Atmandriya priti vancha tare prema kam, tare bale kam. Krishnandriya priti icha tare prem nam. So atmendriya priti vancha, the desire to satisfy one's own senses, is called kama. The desire to satisfy Krishna's senses is called prema. So we need to transmute that kama, which, as is explained here, was once prema, to purify it, so that we become obsessed with the desire to serve Krishna. And even just a little of that service is so pleasing that it completely eclipses the desire for sense gratification. So that's the answer. Envy is a natural concomitant for those who are absorbed only in satisfying themselves. And you can see from the highest levels of prominence, people who are so famous. They're always, competing with each other for more fame and more money and more attention and adulation. It's a completely dissatisfying life. Consumer culture that is developed here, and the earth can't support it. We're destroying a very habitat, so that it'll produce mass starvation and who knows what. That's the result of karma, out of control material desire. So Krishna consciousness purifies that and be satisfied. Tunde tandavani ting butanate tundavali labdehe. I don't know how much nectar these two syllables Krishna have produced. All right, so we're chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I calculated 46 years of chanting. Only 16 rounds. 465 million names I've chanted since I joined. But still, I haven't reached the goal because I'm not chanting purely. There's still something in there. I'm not saying I'm not enjoying to some degree, but to have it where you just don't want to stop, where you want to remember that name at every moment, because it's just like breathing. That's where we want to get to. And it completely eclipses any desire for sense gratification. And not only that, but you feel a connection to everybody, because you see Krishna's in everyone's heart. So how can there be any envy? Your whole mood is giving Krishna to everybody, or enjoying their company because they're giving Krishna to you, and I give Krishna to you, you give Krishna to me, you tell me this, that, we serve together. There's no envy. We're helping each other and enjoy our relationship with Krishna. That's a spiritual life, and that's the spiritual world. Whereas if it's all through matter, which is limited, then you're always competing, and naturally envy arises. That's the way it works. Okay. Anything else? You had a question. No? Is it okay? Answered? All right. All right, let's read a little bit from Krishna book. We will resume this wonderful section in text 38 tomorrow. All right, where is that? Did I lose it? There it is. All right, from Krishna book. I looked it up. We're right there. Okay, that's not it. No, I'm sorry. I have it wrong. This is it. Okay, we're in the middle of the chapter entitled "The Krishna Pleases and the Brahman's Wives." The whole Brahman's Wives chapter. Although the companions of Lord Krishna and Balaram were simple, so they sent the boys, their friends, to beg some food from the Brahmins who were performing these materialistic sacrifices. These Brahmins are so proud that they didn't even give them a yes or no. They didn't even acknowledge their existence. This is how absorbed they were in their material sacrifice. Although the companions of Krishna and Balaram were simple coward boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class Brahmins engaged in the Vedic rituals of sacrifice. But the smarta Brahmins, smarta means they're too much involved in the smriti regulations, the letter of the Vedic law, rather than the spirit, which is love of Krishna. One is permitted to take food after the procedure of diksha before the animal sacrificial ceremony and the sautramani, or ceremony in which liquor is offered. You can imagine. The boys said, "We can take your food at the present stage of your ceremony, for now it will not be prohibited, so you can deliver us the food." Imagine if, the emissary is Krishna is waiting outside on the beach. Can I get some prasad? Can I get some? And what are we going to do? So, are you kidding? Here, take it all. But no, these stupid Brahmins, just making the fires burning, missed out. They lost it. Although the companions of Krishna and Balaram were simple coward boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class Brahmins engaged in the rituals, Vedic rituals. But the smarter Brahmins, who were simply sacrificial-minded, couldn't understand the dictation of the transcendental devotees of the Lord. They couldn't even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord, Krishna and Balaram. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balaram, they didn't care for them, and they refused to speak to the boys. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee Brahmins, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. All their activities are childish because they don't know the purpose of the Vedas, as explained in the Gita, to understand Krishna. This is a line we should know. Vedaischa sarvar ahameva veja. From chapter 15, text 15. Okay, we can look it up, those who want to, later. Very important verse. Vedaischa sarva ahameva veja. I am the purpose of all the Vedas. All the Vedic study leads to me. If it's not leading to me, you're wasting your time. In spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, their knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya gave us his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmin family, if he knows Krishna or the science of Krishna consciousness, he's more than a Brahmin, and he's quite fit to become a spiritual master. There are various details to be observed in the performance of sacrifice. They're known as desha, place, kala, time, pratik, dravya, the different detailed paraphernalia, mantra, hymns, tantra, scriptural evidence, agni, fire, ritvik, learned performance of sacrifice, devata, the demigods, yajamana, the performer of the sacrifice, kratu, the sacrifice itself, and dharma, the procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth, beyond the conception or speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for persons who identify themselves with the body, it's very difficult to understand him. The Brahmins were very much interested in the comforts of the material body and in elevation to the higher planetary residence called Svargavas. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna. When the boys saw that the Brahmins would not reply to them even with a simple yes or no, they became very much disappointed. They then returned to Krishna and Balaram and explained what had happened. After hearing their statements, the Lord smiled. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmins, because that is the way of begging. He convinced them that one who's engaged in collecting or begging shouldn't think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that shouldn't be cause for disappointment. Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of the Brahmins engaged in sacrifice. He also told them that these wives were great devotees. Quote, "They're always absorbed in thinking of us," Krishna Balaram. "Go there and ask for some food in my name and the name of Balaram." Notice that he didn't tell that the first time. He said, don't tell him my name. Why? Because he's supposedly a Vaishya, and Balaram is a Kshatriya. Maybe the boys disobeyed that order, but anyway. So now, my name and the name of Balaram, and I'm sure that they'll deliver you as much food as you want. Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the Brahmins. They found the wives sitting inside the Brahmin's house. Okay, we have to stop here. We will resume tomorrow right there at that point. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.